habitat evaluation. But real quick, we just wanted to show you this book. Typically, when you come to camp, you would have a chance to win it, or we usually give it to a certain cadet. But it's a really good plant book as far as pictures and everything. One of our instructors, Ricky Lennox, who is actually here at camp whenever we have camp in person, wrote the book, and it's got all kinds of great information about plants. The pictures are real great, and it definitely helps whenever you're trying to look at habitat for deer and what kind of forage and browse and habitat they need. You can identify a lot of plants out of this book. So it's a great resource to have, so just looking into that more might be something that interests y'all. But here's Matt, and he's about to give y'all a whole lot of information.
Okay guys, thank y'all for joining us again. You can see we're here at our setting here on the Warren Ranch, and we've talked about plants. We've talked about plant of the day. We've talked some about habitat. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about if we have a given piece of property that we would like to manage for the purpose of whitetail deer or wildlife or livestock or actually anything, is how do we look at what we have on the landscape, give it some way to quantify that, and then roll that into an action plan or a management plan. So, this works, like I say, an evaluation, a forage inventory. This is a useful place to start, whether we're talking about any class of wildlife. As a matter of fact, if you've got a goal in mind, if you've got a goal for your property in mind, if you've got a destination on a map, you cannot figure out how to get there unless you know where you're at. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing now, is building an idea, building getting a picture in our mind of what we have on our property to work with and how we need to get it where we need to be if we're not already there. So this is a deer habitat evaluation. Now, the three factors of habitat that we're going to be looking at are water, cover, whether that be escape cover, screening cover, fawning cover, and food. So water, cover, and food are the three main components of habitat that we're going to be evaluating on this form right here. And this is a form that North Texas Buckskin uses, but it's actually it will be available to y'all, to you cadets, in the link to the Google Drive that y'all will be getting. It will be in there, so if y'all want to try this at home or on a neighbor's place or whatever, you'll have the option. You can print this form out and use it. It's a little 2-pager. It's pretty straightforward and easy to use, and there are professionals in the field of deer management that actually do use forms like this. So it's a pretty good place to start. So we'll just start at water. Deer need to have access to permanent water, preferably within a half mile. Now, obviously, we can't always have water within a half spaced evenly a half mile across some properties, just based on topography or, well water that's available, whatever. And we can't see it from here, but on the other side of this brush line, there's actually a tank down there. So we'll be evaluating our distance to that in this exercise. Cover. Now, on our form here, I'm just reading off the form here. Ideal cover consists of large tracts of moderate or thick brush where deer cannot be seen from about 50 yards. So that means brush that's thick enough. And this back here is fairly open, but as you can see farther across the open area, we do have some thicker brush that's been left for deer cover. And it's thick enough that if a deer were standing, 50 yards back in that, you wouldn't be able to see him, which is, important for travel corridors for deer to cross a landscape. Fawning cover consists of tall grass or low dense brush where newborn fawns can be hidden from predators. We haven't talked much on fawns, but their best defense from predators, while you know, while mom's out eating and foraging, their best defense and best concealment from predators is just to find a spot of heavy cover and lay perfectly still. I'm sure some of you, if you've been out on a ranch this time of year, you might have almost accidentally stepped on a fawn. Happens to me this time of year because they're curled up. You know, a fawn is roughly the size of a loaf of bread. So they're curled up, they're hiding, they're staying still, trying to avoid being seen by predators, and you can get extremely close to them before they'll actually break and run. Food, habitat that provides a stable and reliable food supply will have a variety of both desirable perennial forbs and browse available to deer. The presence of mass-producing trees like oaks, mesquites, and pecans and annual forbs is desirable, but for our purposes on this exercise, we're not really going to count a whole lot of those because the mast from trees is not kind of a guarantee every year, and it's only available on a temporary basis. You know, a tree is going to make an acorn at a certain time of year. They're going to drop, and then once they're eaten, they're all gone until next year. So, and I will just point out behind us here, this is a post oak tree, and when I'm talking about mast, I'm talking about the acorn, I'm talking about the bean on a mesquite tree, or I'm talking about the pears that a prickly pear will make, the big purple pears at this time of year, that can all be utilized by a whitetail deer. Okay, so I'm just going to go on down our form for now. So evaluating what we're looking at behind us, the first question is, what percentage of the area is within a half a mile of permanent water? And we have our ratings here: excellent, good, fair, or poor. Like I said, we have a permanent water source right over here, so in this case, our score on the water is going to be excellent. On the next question is about general cover or escape cover or travel cover. What percentage of the area that you can see is covered by or within about 50 yards of moderate to thick brush? Okay, we do have some thick brush over here. We're fairly open back here, so I'm going to say we're still pretty good on that because our open area is, you know, pretty accessible to a heavy brush area, so I'm going to say we're still rolling around in that good range right there, so 50 to 75%. Fawning cover is the next cover question. What percentage of area supports tall grass or dense low brush? Tall grass, grass tall enough to conceal a fawn is going to be, you know, roughly 10 to 12 inches high. So as we move out, you know, we're probably a little on the short side immediately in this area. It does get a little taller back there. But the way this is broken down, 20 to 50%, I'm saying we're still, even on fawning cover, we're still hovering in that good range that's on our form right here. So food is the next component we're going to be evaluating. Now, this is where the plant ID is absolutely critical. When we're talking about managing habitat, you know, we're talking about managing the plants that the deer need in the area that they live. So this is where that list of plants, you know, have a plant ID book like Marianne was pointing out. Learn your plants, learn their value, and you know, and be able to take a plant and go back, and if you don't know what it is, track it down and figure out what it is. You may have something that's extremely valuable that you wouldn't even know if you didn't know what it was. So this is where the plant ID that we cover during camp is extremely critical because you can't evaluate habitat if you don't know what the plants are. So at this point we're going to do a transect, and we'll do a short one just as a demonstration, but we're going to pick a point on the horizon. Let's just say our large post oak wave. Okay. A think we lost y'all for a little bit, but we'll pick up where we left off. So anyway, we're going to read some random frames between here and our straight line we've sighted on the horizon. Now I'm going to go ahead and bias this a little bit and pick my first frame because I see some plants down here that I'd just like to mention real quick. Let's see here, where'd it go? I had it. All right, well, there's one. All right. So we're gonna pick our random frame and we're gonna evaluate it. And you know, a yard by yard is a pretty good estimation, or a pretty good area, you know, for us to look at. So toss your yardstick, you know, stand with your feet shoulder width apart, or if you have an entire frame, you know, that's even better because you can be more accurate. This is not scientific research by any means. What we're trying to do here is just get a feel for, you know, the general plant community of the property we're on. So one of the plants I'd like to point out here, this is a catnip noseburn. It is a good plant for deer. Don't stick your hand in it and play with it. It is in the nettle family, but it's a good plant for deer. We also have our little prickly pear plant that's growing here. Now these aren't exactly ripe yet, but you see the tunas there that are growing. When they get ripe and get the deep purple, you know, you'll see those bitten off by deer in the summertime, especially on a year that's been dry like this one, and you know, the food resources are fairly scarce. They'll start turning to those dependable drought hardy plants, you know, the perennials with the heavy duty root systems that can survive a drought. And I'll point out, you know, we've got our catnip noseburn. I will point out, you know, we've got ragweed in this picture as well. So when you're evaluating something, you know, ragweed, and here's a little croton plant right here, you know, those aren't necessarily going to be on our preferred list for deer plants, but for dove, you know, croton, that's a valuable plant. For quail, we've got our ragweed. So you can evaluate habitat for multiple species at a time if you know your plants well. So anyway, on our list here, we have our breakdown, and you know, it says food is available approximately every square yard. So in this square yard, yes, that's right. So like I said, highly scientific. You're just going to put a tick mark by excellent. So we've got food available in a square yard. So we pick up our frame, we move on towards our static point on the horizon, and then we're going to toss randomly, and then we're going to evaluate our habitat. Okay, so this will be, you know, the next frame that we're evaluating. Again, we've got some of our catnip noseburn down in here, and so we've got a deer food plant. We've also got one over here. This is a Mexican sagewort plant. It's pretty good quality for deer. And then we've got our little prickly pear. It's not making any tunas right now, but it's there, and it can. So again, we have food, you know, available in this square yard. So that makes us another tick mark by excellent. All right. Now we're going to do this until we feel comfortable that we've got an idea of what's growing in our frames, and then we flip over to our backside of our form, and this is where we fill out, you know, the plants that we've seen in our frame. And that we've seen generally across the landscape. We want at least 10. The diversity in any type of habitat management is the backbone of any piece of property. So the more diversity of plants we have, the better off we are as far as any type of wildlife management or livestock management. The bigger the buffet, you know, the more plants our deer have to pick from on the landscape. So we're just gonna, here's where you would list the preferred plants that you came across. And then once we've done that, we've got 10 questions to answer on the back side to kind of make us think of the big picture of the property we're looking at. So question 1, is there a moderate or distinct browse line on our desirable species? You know, we've got cedar elm trees over here. We've got some greenbrier growing. We've got some prickly ash over there. None of them seem to be, I believe this is a Chittam wood over here, but you know, we're not looking at a distinct browse line in the brush where it looks like deer have just, you know, like it's been hedged up underneath and you can just see through the brush line because there's so much over browsing that's been done down where deer can reach. So is there a moderate distinct browse line? I'm gonna say probably not. Are the desirable shrubs hedged? Looking earlier, there's some greenbrier that's been, you know, you can tell it's been grazed on pretty heavily. Some cedar elms that have been nipped off. So some of the lower growing ones, you can tell they've been browsed a little bit, but they're not really suffering as far as being over browsed. So again, I'm going to say not really. Are desirable and perennial forms present primarily in protected areas? That would be something like if we only saw our deer food plants growing in the middle of a prickly pear cactus where they couldn't get to it. And that's not the case here. We've got, you know, desirable deer plants out in the open where they're accessible. Question number 4, are desirable perennial forbs heavily grazed? Not really. There's an abundance of them and they're not overgrazed. Are young plants present of desirable perennial forbs or browse? You know, we've got some small plants in all stages, or we've got mature plants, we've got small plants, so we have a fairly healthy population of Mexican sagewort over here. We've got mature plants, small plants. So I'd say we have a healthy population of all classes, all ages of plants. Okay, is the area grazed properly to provide adequate fawning cover? I would say this is. You know, we're not seeing just a whole lot of bare ground. We do have some grass cover, you know, and we do have some of it that's fairly tall, where a fawn could curl up and conceal. So I would say in this area, yes, we're grazed properly. Question 7, would additional brush management degrade our cover? In this setting, it might, because we have our travel lane, our dense cover back here, but we know we're fairly open. So if we open up a little too much more, we might start to, you know, affect the way deer would move across this particular part of the ranch. So I'm just going to say yes, additional brush management might degrade our cover a little bit. Can brush management be accomplished in a manner to maintain adequate cover? Now this is again where knowing plants is absolutely critical before we just dive off into a brush management program without knowing what we've got. Yes, we could, you know, spray some prickly pear in this pasture to open up more space for forbs and grass. You can see out here, if the camera can turn, you can see out here these mesquite trees with the browned out leaves. Okay, that's part of the Warren's brush management program, is IPT, or individual plant treatment with herbicide of the species that they don't want. So they are accomplishing brush management in this part of the ranch in a manner that we're still maintaining our overall deer cover. Okay, so yes, we can accomplish a little bit of brush management without hurting our habitat. Question number 9, does the area produce adequate fuel for a prescribed burn? Fuel for a prescribed burn, that's your grasses, that's your fine fuels, your stuff that's easily ignitable and consistent across the property that will carry a flame under the conditions that you want. So yes, we have adequate grass cover on the ground right now. And is additional water development needed or feasible? Not really needed, because like I said, we got permanent water close by. Okay, so then in the big picture of it all, you know, what appears to be our weakest link in our deer habitat, because your deer habitat is only as good as your least available resource. So is it water, general cover, fawning cover, or food? You know, in this case, I'm not going to say we're really limited by anything. Maybe it could be a little more consistent of a travel lane of thicker brush. So I'm just going to say general cover might be our most limiting factor in this situation. And then this form has a spot for you to just make comments, notes, anything to remind you of, you know, what you saw when you were doing this. But based on our evaluation, the overall rating, looking at the big picture, is it poor, fair, good, or excellent? And I'm going to say, honestly, I'm going to say we're a high good. So I'm just going to circle good, and that's the condensed version of habitat evaluation. And you basically, when you're looking at a piece of property and evaluating it for management of whitetail deer, you can do enough of these till you feel like, okay, I've got a pretty good idea of what my deer habitat is like, and now I can start formulating a plan. So y'all probably already guessed it, but code word for this particular video is going to be habitat, and keep that in mind. So thank y'all very much. Hope this has been informative.